Hi there, I'm Rebecca and a really warm welcome back to my channel, PumpkinBecki. In this week's video we're going to look again at some of my favourite plants in the whole wide world, and I'm going to answer some of your questions too. Let's get started. Long-term viewers of my videos will probably have already guessed who we are going to look at without even looking at the title or the thumbnail of the video. Sempervivum! Now, I'm not going to lie, my Sempervivum collection is looking pretty haggard after the summer that we have had. We're going to talk about that as well as answering questions, and we're going to give them a darn good tidy up. This year has been one of the hottest, driest, longest summers. Initially the plants were doing really well. We had tons of rain in May and April, mainly May, and that set everything up for a really good, positive, strong start. But unfortunately, almost as soon as June arrived, the rain stopped and the blazing sun switched on, and it just didn't stop. Right through June, into July, and right through August, we have had 2 rain showers in the last week, I think. Suddenly the weather has turned and given us a chance. The temperatures have come way down, which is great. The peaks were far too much for me. I've lost quite a few things due to the drought conditions. We had a hosepipe ban introduced recently, but to be absolutely honest with you, it was fairly obvious fairly quickly that it was going to be a bit pointless trying to water things, so I let them do what they were going to do. If they were going to survive, all good. If they weren't, well, maybe they shouldn't have a place in my garden, or maybe I need to grow them differently, and that's a decision for maybe a bit later in the year once I've had time to reflect. So I'm just quickly taking off some of the leaves that have fallen. A lot of the trees have already got browning leaves, and that's, you know, just a sort of almost a fake start to autumn. What we don't really want with the Sempervivum is for them to get wet and start breaking down on the surface, because that will just lead to too much moisture. It'll also start shading out the plants if the cover is too thick. So we just need to keep an eye on that sort of thing. What you can see is that this container actually did really well. It's put on lots of pups, it's got really densely packed, and it is time to try thinning it out, which will give me pups for other displays, and it will help this one keep looking fresh and happy. These brown stalks are in fact the dead flower stalks, so these could well have seed in. If I cut them off carefully, I can lay them into my tray of very gritty soil, and who knows, they might give me some babies too. I'm cutting them off rather than trying to pull the pup out, because the pup will now be dead, and that's so I can keep the seed in place. And I'm actually just going to lay the stalks down. I don't know if there's any seed left in them. We'll find out. Oh, there'll be a bit less in that one now I've knocked it. There we go. Right. There, that takes up a bit less space. Don't actually need all of the stem on there. I can just lay them down as they are. The flowers are really beautiful and are very similar to other succulents or indeed like tiny cactus flowers. Let's come in nice and tight to the bowl. You can see here that I've got some mother plants. They've pushed pups, probably last year, and then this pup, which is still attached to mum over here, has also had pups this year. So I'm actually going to pop that whole thing off. All I need to do is just pop my thumb and forefinger around the plant and pull. She says. That was quite tough. It doesn't matter that you're breaking the sort of stem that joins the pup to the mother. It's absolutely fine. What I am going to do before I put this onto my tray of compost is remove these dead leaves. And I can lay that whole thing straight onto my gritty compost. My tray of compost is a little bit of spent succulent compost actually, so it's a peat-free coir based compost. There is only a tiny layer of it in the bottom, which I've just sort of mixed up with lots and lots of grit into it. It's a granite grit, a horticultural grit. Can also be used for chickens. Somebody did ask me about chicken grit, so yeah, that's the same stuff, no problem. And the succulent compost did actually already have the perlite in it, so I haven't added any perlite. It was already in the compost I had, but just to let you know, it is in there. And the only thing I need to do with this little plant is lay it on the surface. Now it's time for me to try and answer some of your questions. One of the big ones I get asked is, why are my Sempervivum dying? They looked so beautiful and now they're just dead. One of the reasons could be what I'm showing you on screen here. Sempervivum are monocarpic, and although the plant might have looked really healthy, it might have had lots of pups, it might have had lots of flowers. Because it is monocarpic, the moment it flowers, that's it. That plant is dead. Its pups will go on and get bigger, but the mother plant will be dead. And that's what you're seeing on screen. Do you keep your Sempervivum outdoors all year round? I do. I keep my plants outside all year round. Sempervivum are not to be confused with other sorts of succulents, ones which are tender, like Echeveria, Graptiveria, Graptopetalum. It will be too wet, too cold, and you will lose them. They can sit outside in pots during the summer and they'll be really happy and they will appreciate the extra sunlight, but then you must bring them indoors again before the weather turns. Sempervivum are hardy and they can tolerate temperatures as low as -34 degrees centigrade. They are completely hardy for US zones 4 to 9. Another big question is, how much water do they need? Again, it's going to really depend on your soil conditions, your weather conditions, the amount of rain you get, and I think slightly the type of Sempervivum you're growing. I've got one called Chocolate Kisses, which makes great big heads. It's almost like an Echeveria, like a hardy Echeveria, but as a plant it's actually quite fussy, and I think that a lot of that is to do with the fact that it is a bred variety. It's been bred to look a bit like an Echeveria, so it's probably lost some of the attributes that make Sempervivum what Sempervivum are. Nice, compact, tight rosettes, quite small, and therefore quite hardy and tolerant of many different conditions, apart from extreme water. Sempervivum don't really suffer from pests like most other plants do. Certainly not in my climate anyway. The worst pest for me are actually the blackbirds, because they love to dig up Sempervivum. And so that means that actually excess moisture is probably the biggest killer of these little plants. You can see how dry this pot is. I have not watered this pot. And we've had a baking summer. Occasionally it's had a watering can poured over it, but I've done very little. Yeah, these plants have still got live growth on them. Like most plants do, they go through a little summertime hibernation. They will stop growing in the absolute heat because they're probably losing as much water through their leaves as they are gaining through their roots. And so therefore it makes no sense for them to continue trying to grow. And sometimes that's why plants will flower. They sort of think, this is my last hurrah. Better do something about that and have some seeds and see if I can carry on through my children. So if you look at your Sempervivum and think, oh God, they're all brown at the bottom. Oh, they must be rotting. They're probably not. If your soil is as dry as this, there is no way on earth that these things are rotting. This is natural shedding. The plant is protecting itself by putting all its resources into the centre, into the crown, into the new leaves. These outside leaves are the oldest leaves of the plant, so they will be the ones that get shed first. And see, a little tiny clean up and it's a lovely healthy plant again. The nice thing about doing this now, we are just in very early September, is that the weather is now cooling right down. We have started to have some moisture, so these plants will be able to get growing again before winter when they go into a second dormancy. What can I do to prevent my Sempervivum from getting too wet and therefore actually genuinely rotting off? There's probably three biggest things that you can do. Grow them in the right soil, grow them in the right location, and also improve drainage even more. Even when you think you've got good drainage, add more grit. These little plants grow wild on the roofs of houses in France, literally on the roof tiles. They do not necessarily need soil. So what here looks like a really diabolical soil mix is perfect for these little beasties. So try not to mollycoddle them. Feed them maybe once, twice a year. I just use a general plant granular feed that I put on all sorts of things. Don't try to overfeed them because lots of lush growth will make them more susceptible to issues. Just let them do their thing. I think that's going to be the motto of this video. Just let them do their thing. Someone did ask me whether they will grow in a sort of bonsai type soil. Obviously I have lots of bonsai viewers here on the channel, so it doesn't surprise me that they're asking about whether they can just carry on using their normal bonsai soil components. I have added spent bonsai compost into my Sempervivum planters, so yeah, and I use lava, pumice and akadama. Somebody did ask me whether they could use turfus, which I know is a component that Canadian bonsai growers use often, especially Mr. Nigel Saunders, possibly the loveliest man in the entire world. And I don't know, I don't have direct experience with turfus, but I have used lava, pumice and akadama quite happily. It's worth a try. I mean, look how many pups I'm getting off these plants here. What's it going to hurt to stick a couple in a different pot with a different soil mixture just to try? And like I said, if you think you've got good drainage, do something to improve it even further. You can see here I'm growing in a pot, but that pot is actually on a stand which holds it a couple of inches, probably more than that, off the ground. Any water is therefore going to drain straight through. If you want to grow them in the ground, then I would suggest just add tons and tons and tons of grit, and then add some more grit. just yeah, don't be shy of grit. Be a bit careful about how much direct rain your plants are going to get. If you are in a wetter location than I am, it might be worth finding some way of semi-sheltering them. And I don't know whether that's with a cold frame or with the lid open, but just so you've got a roof over the top that is deflecting at least some of the rain off. If you have a really rainy season in your location, then that might be something you want to do. You don't need to exclude all rain, but what you don't want is these plants sitting in a puddle. So if you're growing in pots on a patio, for example, you might want to consider some feet. You can buy plant pot feet. They're usually quite big, so maybe some stones or something, just to lift your pot up off the ground a fraction. Doesn't need to be this much. Maybe you could put some pea shingle down, a layer of sort of a couple of inches thick maybe, and stand the pots directly onto that. That will stop organic matter blocking up the hole. I mean, obviously you're going to have crock or drainage material in the bottom of your pot, trying to keep the drainage hole open, but you might find that you get an accumulation of lots of dead leaves or something like that, or moss that sort of forms around the pots, and it will therefore be sort of impeding the water flowing through the pot and out into the ground. So if you stand them on a layer of gravel, it will give them an extra layer of drainage. This one looks officially dead. But let's just have a little look closer at it, because actually I've got colour in the centre, and you can hear Darcy barking in the background. Here we go. So this has got a really nice thick core. I'm probably going to find that this one's going to flower next year. It's quite an old plant. There we go. Take off all the dead ones, and inside is a nice healthy core of a plant. So now the temperatures are cooling down and the rain is starting to fall. This will start to put on some really nice healthy fresh growth again. You can see that replanting the Sempervivums is super simple. I am just putting the cleaned plants back into the same compost. I haven't even refreshed it. I haven't actually watered it. I will do afterwards, just give it a little watering in, just to settle the soil back down again. I'm kind of keeping the different varieties separate, so I've got my cobwebby ones coming around the edge here, and these ones, goodness knows what variety they are, possibly tinctorum, not sure. It can be nice to do. You can arrange these in any way you like. I've done sort of 3 different varieties in a pot and almost divided them into thirds. You could do sort of spiraling concentric rings of different varieties, and giving them a little bit of space in between each other just to allow them room to grow, especially as I say that damper weather comes in, the temperatures cool a little bit, they will put on some more growth, so give them some space to move into. It doesn't have to be a lot, just you know, a few millimeters around each crown. If they haven't got much of a root, then just lay them on the surface, just like I have done in the seed tray. I like to use not only a variety of textures but also of sizes. Because it's been so dry, I haven't got many really big hens at the moment. They've sort of all closed themselves down. But there are certainly lots of little pups that I can tuck in to any gaps and make it look really nice and full. Just remember that the thicker you plant it now, the sooner you're going to have to sort of take it apart and reset it. But hey, this is really good fun. I really enjoy just sort of sitting here quietly tidying up my Sempervivums, which is lucky because this is just one of the myriad of pots I have full of these little cuties, and yeah, I've got a lot of work to do after this very tough summer for them. There we go, that's my Sempervivum bulb all replanted. It's now got room to grow again, and all those dead leaves tidied up, which will be great for keeping it nice and healthy over winter. And just before we sign off, some people were asking me how my mother's engineering brick Sempervivum was doing. I do not know the variety, but I do love the purpley, steely colour that it is. It's done really well. It has very pale yellowy flowers, which is interesting because most of my other Sempervivums have pink flowers, but no, this one has yellow flowers. And you can see I'm just starting to encourage it to grow down now into the second hole. Yeah, there's been lots of new pups this year. Beautiful flowers. It's doing really well. Right, that's it for this week's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any other questions about Sempervivums, please ask them in the comments below. I will do my absolute best to answer them. Please remember to like, share and subscribe to me here on YouTube. And until next time, bye!